One introduction RAWSEP View. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only. For home building and furniture building, for just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lungs, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the Eco-Design Wood Stove, and International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. RAWSEP View purple air PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.
Hi, my name is Lily. Andrew gave you the intro to residents against wood smoke emission particulates and their concern for air pollution from indoor residential wood burning. Residents against wood smoke emission particulates, or RAWSEP, would like every near neighbor of an indoor residential wood burner whose wood smoke enters their yards and sickens the near neighbors to have a purple air PM 2.5 monitor hanging from the eaves of their home to measure the level of PM 2.5 entering their yards. That measurement of air pollution should be used as evidence of unnecessary air pollution, and each indoor residential wood burner should be shut down based on that evidence, one indoor residential wood burner at a time if necessary. The presentation by Andrew ended at 2 minutes 5 seconds. The same presentation by Emma starts at 2 minutes 3 seconds before the end of this podcast. So I am Lily, your timekeeper, and you can start the next podcast at 2 minutes 5 seconds in if you would not like to see the presentation by Andrew a second time. This presentation by me, Lily, ends at 5 minutes in. What you will see in the main content of this RAWSEP podcast will be news about air pollution from indoor residential wood burning and how that air pollution is being combated by ordinary people just like you who are unfortunately near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners at this time. There will also be news about unnecessary and highly polluting use of wood as fuel in industrial wood burners and preventable air pollution from wood burning wildfires. There will also be news about air pollution from PM 2.5 from gas-powered cars. There will also be news about airborne diseases which are also preventable with vaccines such as COVID-19 and measles and whooping cough, to name just a few. In 2025, residents against wood smoke emission particulates is also concerned with combating the Trump destruction of government funding for programs which protect human health through the Department of Health and Human Services, and Trump destruction of programs which fund the science and medical research plan to protect human health from preventable illnesses. Protecting human health is a patriotic act, and our defense against enemies is weakened if we are not as healthy as we can be. Heat pump rebates are now offered by the federal government, distributed through the eligible United States, are available in 2025 and are the best, cleanest, and now cheapest alternative to indoor residential wood burning if that burning is actually done to purportedly save money. Wind and solar as sources of the electricity that powers heat pumps and electric cars is also cheaper than burning wood. The adverse health effects that are caused by indoor residential wood burning also come at a cost to near neighbors, both in shortening and ending their lives and in actual hospital, clinic, and funeral costs. Instead of being compensated monetarily, near neighbors should instead be able to achieve immediate relief by stopping indoor residential wood burning in their hyper-localized neighborhoods, which relief readings from purple air PM 2.5 monitors used as evidence of air pollution will help them achieve. Welcome to news about hopeful scientific and medical achievements that will also help us achieve the goal of clean air to breathe.
Webisode 57DHXXPA September 22nd, 2025 Farm Aid and Sunday marred by PM 2.5 wood stove use. In Webisode 57DHXXPA, one COVID-19 vaccine changes what it means for you too at a wildfire with a notebook and a mass questions of a reporter questions pulled her into the subculture of wildland firefighting policy changes followed two Farm Aid concert September 20th, 2025 AI, overview Minneapolis, Minnesota Willie Nelson and Senator Amy Klobuchar, both recently attended Farm Aid 2025 in Minneapolis, where Klobuchar met the legendary musician for Sunday Solar Day. September 21st, 2025 here comes the Sunday, 55 years after the first Earth Day climate activists are organizing a nationwide celebration of solar power on Sunday RAWSEP View. The editor of RAWSEP must interject that one Canadian celebrant of Sunday interviewed for this article recently installed a wood stove in place of a natural gas furnace in the mistaken belief that this would somehow be better for the environment. Instead, the wood stove will increase the probability of the wood stove owner and his near neighbors becoming ill and dying young from the PM 2.0 emissions of indoor residential wood burning. 5 United Nations 6 world leaders profiled for their views on fighting climate change and pollution in their countries of the Marshall Islands, Australia, Guyana, Kenya, Finland, and Bangladesh. 6 Science RAWSEP View sulfur in the air blocks some other harmful pollutants or pollutant effects. But RAWSEP warns that sulfur in the air is not benign. If there is a choice, the editor of RAWSEP would choose choking less from PM 2.5 from wood burning and fossil fuel burning, emitting sulfur molecules among other pollutants as well, rather than frying less by deliberately inundating the atmosphere with sulfur. From the article headline opinion, it turns out air pollution was good for something. 7 Consumers Housing RAWSEP View, the renovating couple, changed to a natural gas stove to a wood burning stove for the aesthetics. The couple and their 3 children in the future may suffer ill health and early deaths from the unnecessary change to this highly polluting form of home heating. A wood stove emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as a natural gas furnace. 8 United States House of Representatives Republicans lose 1 House seat in GOP House majority suffers blow in special election main content. COVID-19 vaccine changes what it means for you. Day 2 of ACP excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization, your local epidemiologist. Friday, September 19th, 2025. Today was the second meeting of ACIP, the Vaccine Policy Advisory Group of the Center for Disease Control CDC, on the agenda changes to COVID-19 vaccine recommendations. The meeting yesterday covered MMRV and Hep B vaccines. Catch that post here if you missed it. CDC staff were not in the room. Instead, they watched from a separate live stream due to safety concerns directed at them by some ACIP members. That is where we are right now in the U.S. This meeting was even more heated than the meeting yesterday. Nearly all ACIP members are longtime COVID-19 contrarians, many still defending hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin long after they were proven ineffective. Their views built over the pandemic spilled out as a fire hose of falsehoods. We counted more than 50 mixed with selective science. There were also process violations ranging from abandoning grade methodology, the standard system for evaluating medical evidence quality, without explanation, to multiple vote reversals and ACIP members abstaining due to confusion. It was a mess. I am burned out. It is Friday, but ultimately today was a win for all of those pushing back on RFK Jr. and a victory for patient choice. Here is what happened and what it means for you. Decisions from the past 2 days. COVID-19 vaccines still recommended by the federal government for everyone over 6 months, but the decision should be made in partnership with their clinician. This is broader than the FDA license, which means the CDC recommends off-label use, but less wide than professional organizations. Not everyone has a clinician, so this creates massive barriers. COVID-19 recommendations as of September 19th, 2025. Figure by your local epidemiologist. Hepatitis B, no vote for reasons not explained. This is highly unusual and makes me nervous for what is ahead. For now, no changes, but we are already hearing this is confusing. Newborn nurseries. MRV, measles, mumps, rubella, and varicella combination vaccine removed as an option for the first dose for a child. My level of concern. Yellow. See justification from my post yesterday here. MRV vaccine changes after the ACIP meeting September 19th, 2025. Figure by your local epidemiologist. What happened with COVID-19 vaccines? The COVID-19 broad recommendation is welcomed, but surprising, the science has not changed. COVID-19 vaccines remain safer than the virus and continue to provide additional protection to all. However, the questions and statements at this meeting did not reflect their broad support of the vaccine. Some points raised were reasonable, e.g. disease is becoming less severe for some groups. True uptake is low, worth discussing, but these were folded into falsehoods. Claimed they do not prevent infection, so are not worthwhile. False. They prevent hospitalization and death, and they do reduce transmission, though not permanently. Claimed there is DNA contamination of the vaccines. False. There is not. All DNA tested by appropriate methods is well within regulatory limits. Claimed spike proteins appear in breast milk. False. The mRNA vaccine can appear transiently in breast milk, but it is not shown to have any harmful effects on nursing children, and it is eliminated by their digestive tract. Claimed COVID vaccines cause cancer, autoimmune disease, and excess deaths. False. They do not. We tallied more than 50 falsehoods in real time. The law of Brandolini was on full display. It takes orders of magnitude more energy to refute lies than to spread them. Historically, during the meeting, ACIP members asked questions and make clarifications to build a case for their vote, but today ACIP members argued COVID-19 risks outweigh benefits and then voted the opposite. The mismatch between the vote and the discussion tells me something is happening behind the scenes. RFK may be feeling the heat as they take away choices from people and restrict access. People in the U.S. actually want vaccines. They want to have a choice. I think this is also reflective of grassroots pushback, political pressure, state actions, and strong internal voices curbing the most extreme proposals. So many people have been working incredibly hard to ensure patient access. For those who want the vaccine, what does this COVID-19 vote mean for you? You should talk to a healthcare provider, including pharmacists, about getting a COVID-19 vaccine. Pharmacists can provide vaccines in all 50 states using shared clinical decision making. Now is a great time to get vaccinated to prevent getting really sick. And do not forget to get your RSV if you are eligible, and flu vaccines. Your COVID-19 vaccine should be covered at no out-of-pocket cost to you based on the decision today, as well as firm commitments from insurers. You may still need a Prescription depending on where you live, because COVID-19 vaccines remain off-label for some groups like healthy adults and children, given the CDC and FDA are not aligned. Some states still require a prescription at pharmacies. We have been tracking state actions daily, and here is the latest landscape. Expect changes in the coming days as states review their laws and regulations. Note, there may be supply issues, especially with vaccines given for kids, that there are many more limited options this year. Also, many clinics have been waiting for this ACP vote, so purchasing and ordering may be delayed. Bottom line, go get vaccinated if possible. In the past 2 days, your vaccine choices have slightly narrowed, but not dramatically. As I said yesterday, RFK Jr. has doused the house in gasoline and lit small fires across the property. The flames have not reached the house yet because a number of players are holding buckets of water. Love Willie. 2 at a wildfire with a notebook and a mask. Questions of a reporter. Questions pulled her into the subculture of wildland firefighting. Policy changes followed. Hannah Dreier Center reporting on the Gifford Fire in California in August. Hannah Dreier is an investigative reporter for the New York Times. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization, the New York Times. September 13, 2025. Behind-the-scenes insights into how our journalism comes together this summer. I followed a wildfire crew as they fought back flames in the mountains of Southern California. To join them, I would needed to stock up on the same gear the firefighters used: flame-resistant clothes, a helmet, goggles, gloves. My socks had to be 100% cotton because synthetics could melt to my skin. The security team at the New York Times made me take a hiking endurance test, and they gave me a portable fire shelter to use as a last resort if the flames overtook us. One thing I had that the firefighters did not: a mask. I had first noticed this absence back in January when wildfires swept into Los Angeles. That smoke was especially toxic with the fumes from burning electric cars and asbestos-filled homes. But in photos I could see that firefighters were barefaced, breathing it all, and I wanted to understand why none of them were wearing masks and what the consequences might be. Those questions pulled me into the subculture of wildland firefighting and became the basis for a series of articles published recently in the Times. On forums, I found firefighters swapping tales of gruesome injuries and posting pictures of their bushy beards. Many were also saying they had gotten sick from the job. Soon I was on the phone with firefighters in their 20s, 30s, and 40s who were battling rare cancers, awaiting lung transplants, and dealing with heart damage so severe they struggled to hold their children. One of them was Joel Iseminger, a then 25-year-old from Oregon who had just been diagnosed with an aggressive form of leukemia. He had posted a photo of himself in fire gear on the balcony of a cancer ward. I was struck by how young he looked and how scared. When I met him in person this spring, he told me that he had fallen in love with the work when he was 18 and fought fires all around the West now months after his diagnosis. He was thinking about going back. His oncologist told him that was risky, but he needed the cash. For firefighters, coming face to face with death is part of the job. As I spent time with Joel and his friends, I started to understand that black humor helps them cope with one of the riskiest occupations in America. They talk about firefighting constantly. It is in the movies. They love the memes they trade. They joke that their metallic fire shelters are just burrito wrappers for the corner. They say the best way to cure a fire line injury is to rub dirt in it. If you die on a fire, they joke your shoes go to whoever calls dibs first. They wear their sooty pants and boots around town, even though the ash is not exactly healthy. When Joel brought up the idea of going back to work, one of his friends, nicknamed Cowboy, just shook his head and said, "Cowboy say, when you ride your last one, make sure it is your best one." Joel had never worn a mask. While fighting fires, I learned that the Forest Service actually had a decades-old policy of prohibiting masks. That rule, combined with a macho culture, meant that firefighters worked in smoke with no protection from its poisons. When the first California megafire of the season broke out this summer, I traveled with the photographer Loren Elliott, a frequent contributor to the Times, to see the sort of dangers Joel and his friends had faced. I tagged along with Forest Service crews racing to stop the Gifford Fire, which was threatening thousands of homes near Santa Barbara. The flames were burning across more than 100,000 acres, and as we got close, the air turned hazy and acrid. The fire had been quiet all morning, but in the afternoon it suddenly started rolling down the hills toward us. I had to force myself to stay put as I watched it approach. The crew went into high alert and scrambled to clear a fire break. The flames came almost up to our feet, sparks jumping over the containment line. Squad leaders continually checked the wind to see if we should evacuate. The smoke that settled over us made my eyes water and gave me an instant headache. It was hard to see more than 3 feet away. The overpowering smell of campfire would linger on my skin and hair for days, no matter how many showers I took. I was wearing an N95 mask, but the firefighters around me were barefaced. One joked that they were all going to get cancer someday. Another teased his crewmate that he was a bad luck charm because they always got tear gassed while working together. I recognized the same fatalism I had heard from Joel and his friends now, though this way of thinking may be starting to change. After our articles were published, the Forest Service came under pressure from Congress to better protect firefighters. This past week, the agency announced a major shift. Firefighters will now be given masks and encouraged to use them. When I go back out for more wildfire reporting in a few days, I may not be the only person wearing one. Free Farm Aid Concert, September 20th, 2025. AI Overview. Minneapolis, Minnesota. Willie Nelson and Senator Amy Klobuchar both recently attended Farm Aid 2025 in Minneapolis, where Klobuchar met the legendary musician Nelson, a one-founder and tireless advocate for the annual concert series supporting family farmers. Performed at the event. Klobuchar, a Minnesota senator, was present as a supporter of family farmers and even introduced another musician at the event. Key details. Event. Farm Aid 2025 location, Minneapolis. The Willie Nelson role. One of the founders and a longtime champion of Farm Aid dedicated to supporting family farmers in rural communities. The Senator Klobuchar role, Minnesota senator and supporter of family farmers who met Nelson and introduced other musicians at the concert. For Sunday Solar Day, September 21st, 2025. Here comes the Sunday. 55 years after the first Earth Day, climate activists are organizing a nationwide celebration of solar power on Sunday. Susan B. Miller, a retired scientist emeritus from University of Wisconsin-Madison, is hosting open houses this weekend at her solar-powered home to talk about solar energy. RAWSEP View. The editor of RAWSEP must interject that one Canadian celebrant of Sunday interviewed for this article recently installed a wood stove in place of a natural gas furnace in the mistaken belief that this would somehow be better for the environment. Instead, the wood stove will increase the probability of the wood stove owner and his near neighbors becoming ill and dying young from the PM2.5 emissions of indoor residential wood burning. The mistaken person may also have believed that installing a wood burning stove in place of a natural gas furnace might be better for human health, although that it's hard to believe that such ignorance would survive side by side with knowledge about clean energy, such as solar energy panels, which were unfortunately not suitable for the location and direction facing of the house, and were not suitable for the cold climate of Canada, according to this one person speaking of cold climates heat pumps that work down to 40 degrees below zero and also function as air conditioners and lower electric heating bills immediately are being given heat pump rebates in Canada, and these will not disappear at the end of 2025. Unlike disappearing heat pump rebates in the United States, the Canadian homeowner did not say that his home lacked electricity, so a heat pump would be the cleanest and increasingly cheapest way to heat his home, rather than a wood stove, which emits air polluting and human health harming PM2.5 at levels 450 times that of PM2.5. Emissions from a natural gas furnace PM2.5 also hastens climate change. The person in Canada uses an electric heater with wood stove as backup, hopefully not a wood stove as first choice for home heating. The best case scenario and the lowest cost when figuring in the cost of hospitalizations and early funerals sparked by wood burning would be an electricity driven heat pump with the existing natural gas furnaces for backup if temperatures reach lower than 40 degrees below zero, an increasingly remote possibility even in cold Canada. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP. For brevity and clarity in relationship to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization, The New York Times, September 20th, 2025. On Friday morning, Susan Miller was readying her home in Madison, Wisconsin for an open house, but she was not trying to sell it. Instead, Ms. Miller opened her doors to a dozen strangers curious to see her heat pump, solar panels, battery storage, and electric induction stove. It was an early peek at one of more than 450 events taking place as part of Sunday, a nationwide demonstration of solar power and renewable energy. Most of the events spread across nearly all 50 states, including EV parades, church sermons, and house tours are set to take place on Sunday, the day before the autumn solar equinox. Ms. Miller was getting a jump on the action. You can live in a 90-year-old home like this one without burning anything, she said. Now all those fossil fuels are gone. Bill McKibben, the climate activist who also writes for The New Yorker, got the idea for Sunday a few years ago as the cost of renewables began to drop. Solar power has become the cheapest form of energy in the world, with costs declining by nearly 90% in the last 15 years, according to our World in Data. Solar power is longer the Whole Foods of energy. Nice, but pricey, Mr. McKibben said. Instead, it has become the Costco of power, cheap, available in bulk, and on the shelf, ready to go. He said. Photo of a home with a vegetable garden and solar panels on its roof on an overcast day. The back of the Ms. Miller home in Madison, Wisconsin. Sunday comes as the Trump administration and the Republican-controlled Congress have moved to eliminate tax credits for electric vehicles, heat pumps, and solar power. The administration has also repealed funding for Biden-era programs like Solar for All, which aim to make solar energy available to low-income households. In recent weeks, it has worked to throttle the offshore wind industry, canceling wind farms in the middle of construction. At the same time, the Trump administration is promoting the expanded development and use of oil, gas, and coal, the burning of which is heating the planet. It will not be the first American solar celebration. President Jimmy Carter, who famously installed 32 solar panels on the White House, declared May 3, 1978 as Sunday. President Ronald Reagan later removed the solar panels. Some Sunday organizers in Republican-led states are hoping to demonstrate grassroots support for clean energy. Lisa Young, the director of the Idaho chapter of the Sierra Club, said community solar, which allows people from multiple residences to share the solar power from one installation, has faced pushback from local utilities and has not been enabled by state legislation. Idaho also lost $56 million in federal Solar for All grants that were canceled by the Environmental Protection Agency. The Lisa Young chapter has helped organize half a dozen events across the Idaho for Sunday, including bilingual workshops, an electric car expo, and a bicycle rally. One event is a party where the group will launch a crowdfunding initiative to put community solar panels on a hair salon in Boise. The owner of the salon, Sherry Baber, said the cost of installing solar previously made it seem inaccessible for some black communities in Boise, but with lower prices and potential savings on electric bills, she wanted her business to serve as a model. One of the more than 80 planned tours in the Washington, D.C. area will be hosted by Natalie Pien. Since installing solar panels on her Virginia home 15 years ago, Ms. Pien said her energy costs fell to about $35 a month from more than $150 a month thanks to a program from her utility that credits her for the electricity her solar panels produce for the grid during the summer months. She often does not get a bill at all. Most states have some form of such programs known as net metering, and they can make or break the appeal of residential solar. One study found net metering results in at least double the demand from homeowners. A smattering of Sunday events are happening in Canada, Australia, the United Kingdom, and Europe. One event in Germany will inform residents about new standards for Balkenkraftwerk, the term for the balcony-mounted solar panels. Currently in 500,000 German homes in Canada, Joe Ackerman is hosting a Sunday event. Without solar, he said his Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada house was not suitable for solar panels because of its orientation and the fact that it snows frequently and heavily where he lives. But recently, Dr. Ackerman was able to stop using natural gas to heat his century-old home by installing insulation and using an electric heater and wood stove. There is no improvement on your house that is too small, he said. Bobby Monticello, a senior organizer for Mothers Out Front, a climate nonprofit. Lane Boldman, the director of the Kentucky Conservation Committee. Sunday will feature more than just homes at an event run by several nonprofits in Kentucky. Lane Boldman, the director of the Kentucky Conservation Committee, will show off her solar-outfitted Winnebago that allows her to camp off the grid in Virginia. Fairfax County schools will power a live band and a cotton candy machine by plugging them into an electric school bus, one of several from their growing fleet. Perhaps the Biggest Sunday event will be held in Portland, Oregon, where dozens of local groups have put together a large festival. Laura Iwanaga led the organization for the Portland Sunday event for the local chapter of Third Act, a nationwide climate advocacy organization. Founded by McKibben, we all know what we are fighting against, but we do not always think about what we are fighting for. 5 World United Nations 6 World Leaders profiled for their views on fighting climate change and pollution in their countries of the Marshall Islands, Australia, Guyana, Kenya, Finland, and Bangladesh. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization, the 6 world leaders profiled are one. Hilda C. Heine, president of the Marshall Islands. Heine says big emitters are very comfortable and they do not want to move from their comfort level. 2 Anthony Albanese, Prime Minister of Australia. Albanese says that as the 14th largest economy in the world, Australia also faces a monumental challenge in reducing emissions. The country remains reliant on fossil fuels, including coal, which generates nearly half its electricity, but Albanese has been outspoken in calling for Australia to be a global leader in lowering emissions and embracing renewables. 3 Mohamed Irfan Ali, president of Guyana. Alice says we cannot be naive. The world will need fossil fuel a long time into the future. Tucked beside Venezuela and Brazil, Guyana is full of lush tropical rainforests and has started innovative programs to protect its biodiversity. It is also an ascendant oil exporter and is set for some extraordinary growth in oil production in the years ahead. President Mohamed Irfan Ali feels this paradox intensely. Last year, he accused a BBC reporter of lecturing him on climate change and railed against the moral hypocrisy of Western nations who criticized Guyana while denying financial support for environmental conservation. When we spoke, Ali described how his government is working to defend against sea level rise and deforestation. At the same time, he spoke proudly of growing revenues from fossil fuel production and of putting some of those profits into the renewable energy transition of Guyana. The New York Times reporter said, "I heard implicitly in what you just said that climate change is the ultimate long-term problem. In a world that is so often consumed with these short-term crises." Ali replied, "I would put it even better. It is a sacrificial lamb. Climate change is a sacrificial lamb that is always postponed. If you look at the last 5 years, we have not accelerated momentum. We have really stagnated. We are not implementing what we commit ourselves to do globally." The New York Times reporter replied, "One thing that has not stagnated is temperature rise. What will this mean for the people of Guyana?" Ali replied, "If we did not have the type of revenue stream that we have now, it would have meant debt. It would have meant destruction. It would have meant our economy just falling apart. Guyana is a new oil producer, but we are using the resource to finance our energy transition, to build resilient infrastructure to support the region that we are in, to invest in livelihood options that will keep our forests standing, which stores many gigatons of carbon. We are investing in solar farms, hydro, natural gas, wind, and biomass, all aimed at transitioning to a low-emission energy grid. We are building off-grid systems, solar farms, wind farms for the hinterland community where the indigenous people live." The New York Times reporter replied, "Climate change is a sacrificial lamb. You talk about how for Guyana, the answer to coping with a hotter world is in fact being funded by the production of more fuels that are causing that warming. That, of course, is sort of the conundrum in a nutshell, right?" Ali replied, "I do not see it as a problem." For William Ruto, president of Kenya, says, "When it comes to emissions, we are paying for a crime that others committed." President William Ruto of Kenya has worked to position himself as the climate leader of Africa. He promotes gains of Kenya in bringing electricity to a majority of its population, and he points to the Kenyan energy system, which is powered in large part by biofuels and wind and solar power rather than coal, oil, and gas. To hear Ruto tell it Africa has the potential to become a global powerhouse in renewable energy, it is a compelling vision. But as Ruto himself has discovered, realizing it is no easy feat. Many African countries, including Kenya, have struggled to obtain competitive financing for clean energy projects, and many citizens who find basic government services lacking have not thrilled to the Ruto focus on pressing for global climate action. 5 Petteri Orpo, Prime Minister of Finland. In recent years, Finland has done something unusual. It has managed to cut down on carbon emissions while growing its economy. Of course, it helps that the Finnish public is wildly supportive of government action on climate. Still, Finland is notable for having one of the most aggressive climate targets in the world, with a commitment to being carbon neutral by 2035. The country has made major investments in wind energy, nuclear power, hydropower, and biofuels, which account for nearly all of the electricity of Finland. But going green is not easy in every sector. Finland is still relying on oil because of the slow uptake of clean alternatives for shipping fuel. When we spoke in July, Prime Minister Petteri Orpo described a nation being transformed by rising temperatures. And finally, 6 Mohammed Yunus, chief advisor of Bangladesh. Yunus says Bangladesh does not have its own source of hydropower. It is a flat land, so we do not have much except for solar. From the article headline, 6 World leaders on navigating climate change without the U.S. The New York Times, 6 Science RAWSEP View sulfur in the air blocks some other harmful pollutants or pollutant effects, but RAWSEP warns that sulfur in the air is not benign. If there is a choice, the editor of RAWSEP would choose choking less from PM 2.5 from wood burning and fossil fuel burning, emitting sulfur molecules among other pollutants as well, rather than frying less by deliberately inundating the atmosphere with sulfur. From the article headline, opinion, it turns out air pollution was good for something. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, September 21st, 2025. Opinion by Zeke Housefather and David Keith. Dr. Housefather is the climate research lead at Stripe and a research scientist with Berkeley Earth. Dr. Keith is a professor and founding director of the Climate Systems Engineering Initiative at the University of Chicago. Since the Industrial Revolution, burning coal and oil has filled the air with sulfur, shortening the lives of billions of people. In response, countries passed stringent air pollution laws requiring coal plants to scrub out sulfur and ships to switch to cleaner fuels. Global sulfur emissions have fallen some 40% since 2006. China alone has slashed them by about 70%. We should celebrate cleaner air, but we also have to reckon with an unintended consequence. It turns out that by reflecting sunlight back into space, tiny sulfur particles protected Earth from about a third of the warming caused by human emissions of carbon dioxide. Now more of the underlying greenhouse gas warming is showing through accelerating climate change. As The Economist recently put it, if India chokes, less it will fry more for. Some of us in the world of climate science, this raises a thorny question: should we explore replacing the inadvertent cooling effects of sulfur with a cleaner, deliberate version of sulfur emissions? Geoengineering the climate in this way is not a new idea. It was in the first U.S. high-level climate report that reached the desk of President Lyndon Johnson in 1965. While several options have been proposed recently, the most plausible way to make Earth more reflective is to use a small fleet of high-altitude aircraft to increase the amount of sulfuric acid droplets in the upper atmosphere. We know this can work when volcanic eruptions put large amounts of sulfur in the upper atmosphere. Such as Pinatubo in 1991. Earth was noticeably cooler for a few years. We should take such an idea seriously, because the costs of losing accidental sulfur cooling were made painfully evident this year, when heat waves pushed temperatures above 120 degrees Fahrenheit in the Middle East and North Africa. If sunlight reflection could save lives and protect the environment, it is at least worth discussing. From the article headline, "Pollution was good for something." The New York Times. 7. Consumers Housing RAWSEP View. The renovating couple changed to a natural gas stove to a wood-burning stove for the aesthetics. The couple and their 3 children in the future may suffer ill health and early deaths from the unnecessary change to this highly polluting form of home heating. A wood stove emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as a natural gas furnace. From the article headline, "In the Berkshires, changing the floors was only the beginning." The New York Times. 8. United States House of Representatives Republicans lose 1 House seat in GOP House majority suffers blow in special election. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. AI overview. Due to resignations and a special election, the GOP House majority has shrunk by 1 seat in 2025 after a special election in Virginia on September 9, 2025. The Republican majority in the House of Representatives is 219 to 213, with 3 vacant seats. Factors contributing to the reduction of the Republican majority: Rep. Mark Green, Republican of Tennessee, resigned in July 2025, and a special election to fill this vacancy is scheduled for December 2, 2025. In the special election for the Virginia 11th Congressional District on September 9, 2025, Democrat James Walkinshaw retained the seat for his party, meaning the GOP did not gain a seat status of the House of Representatives as of September 10, 2025. The House has 219 Republicans and 213 Democrats. 3 seats are currently vacant. The Tennessee 7th District vacated by Republican Mark Green, the Arizona 7th District vacated by Democrat Raul Grijalva, and the Texas 18th District vacated by Democrat Sylvester Turner. The reduced majority means Speaker Mike Johnson can now only lose 2 Republican votes on a party line measure. Headlines. The New York Times. September 22, 2025. California climate change. California is so muggy this week that it feels like Florida. The New York Times. Consumers clothing blue jeans. RAWSEP View uncomfortable and a bad fit, according to the reviewer. From the article headline, "If you love Spanx, you might like some of its jeans." Reviews by Wirecutter. Consumers internet service can Google avoid a breakup twice. The New York Times. Consumers retailer Amazon faces trial on FTC charges related to Prime service. The New York Times. Futurism. The subject of the novel is the year 2120 book review. What We Can Know by Ian McEwan. The New York Times. Human interest. What it means to set a boundary. The New York Times. New Jersey race for governor. 7 ways the candidates for New Jersey governor would differ on day 1. The New York Times. New York City. The Broadway musical is in trouble. The New York Times. New York City. World United Nations. Traffic increases. It is gridlock week in Manhattan as UN General Assembly starts. The New York Times. New York State. Housing with new plan. Hopeful fast tracks housing supply. The New York Times. Republicans gerrymandering by Democrats. Opinion. When the gerrymander comes from MAGA. The New York Times. Science RAWSEP View. It is likely that an unknowledgeable and deliberately ignorant Trump appointee like Bhattacharya, like the recent RFK Jr. ACIP panel headed by his 2022 accomplice Kulldorff, can harm science and harm public health delivery in America. From the article headline, "Opinion: Can Jay Bhattacharya save science?" The New York Times. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. From Wikipedia. September 22, 2025. In April 2022, Bhattacharya wrote that he experienced racist attacks and death threats during the pandemic. He alleged that big tech outlets like Facebook and Google suppressed our ideas, falsely deeming them misinformation. He wrote that I started getting calls from reporters asking me why I wanted to let the virus rip when I had proposed nothing of the sort. Also, in April 2022, in response to California proposing a bill that would discipline physicians for promoting or spreading false information about COVID-19, Bhattacharya said that the bill could turn doctors into agents of state public health rather than advocates for their patients. In December 2022, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis named Bhattacharya, Kulldorff, and several others to his newly formed Public Health Integrity Committee to offer critical assessments of recommendations from federal health agencies. Later in 2022, when COVID boosters for the Omicron variant were available, Bhattacharya made multiple misleading statements about them, including incorrectly describing how they were tested. TV, how Trumper John Lampley spends a day getting ready for the Late Show with Stephen Colbert. The New York Times. TV star, Democrat RAWSEP View. Rather than the personal whim of Trump, this writer believes there is a principle involved in Trump demanding the Kimmel suspension. From the article headline, Opinion: The conservative principle behind the Kimmel suspension. The New York Times. TV star, Democrat RAWSEP View. The term cancel culture has been assigned to Democrats by the media. The term consequence culture has been assigned to Republicans by the media. From the article headline, Opinion: The dangers of consequence culture. The New York Times. Texas. Houston. Republican redistricting is sowing chaos in Houston. The New York Times. First came the Republican gerrymander in Texas, now comes the Democratic chaos in Houston. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against with smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization, when Republican lawmakers, at the behest of President Trump, successfully redrew the congressional map of Texas this summer. The explicit aim was to grab as many as 5 U.S. House seats from the Democrats to try to preserve the Republican majority in the 2026 midterm elections, but well before then the repercussions are being felt in a newly drawn district in Houston. Even though it will almost certainly stay Democratic, a certain amount of confusion is likely to play out in districts from the Rio Grande Valley to suburban Dallas as voters and candidates adjust to new lines that are usually redrawn only once a decade. Trump foreign policy critiqued. RAWSEP View. This article is by Hillary Clinton. The foreign policy referred to is the wish of Trump to be nominated for a Nobel Prize for his failed diplomacy between India and Pakistan. From the article headline, Opinion: The Perils of Getting Too Personal in Foreign Policy. The New York Times. Trump Justice Department apparent corruption, closed investigation into Tom Homan for accepting bag of cash. The New York Times. Trump Kirk actions, 4 takeaways from the Kirk Memorial. The New York Times. Trump Kirk actions behind the Kirk's spiritual journey that fused Christianity and politics. The New York Times. Trump tariffs are damaging the biggest foreign source of screws in America. The New York Times. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against with smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization, key details. Leading supplier Taiwan has been the American top foreign source of screws and other metal fasteners for over 30 years. Growing competition. China has risen to become the second largest supplier of screws to the United States. Impact of tariffs. Recent tariffs on steel and aluminum have created financial pressures for Taiwanese screw makers, potentially impacting their ability to compete. Industry significance. The Taiwanese screw industry is a significant part of the Taiwan economy, with thousands of companies and a large portion of the workforce involved in screw manufacturing. United States Congress possible shutdown at end of September. RAWSEP View. Opinion pieces states that Democratic demands emphasis should be on stopping Trump tariffs rather than saving health care from Trump budget cuts. From the article headline, Opinion: Democrats are picking the wrong shutdown fight. The New York Times. United States Senate. RAWSEP View. Elizabeth Warren wants to bring down costs for the average voter. From the article headline, Opinion: Elizabeth Warren on the story, Democrats did not and will not embrace the New York Times. Canada food high-tech greenhouse breaks fresh produce to the Arctic of Canada. The New York Times. Denmark consumers weight loss drug industry. The Novo Nordisk woes are slimming the Denmark economic growth. The New York Times. Belgium aviation cyber attack forces Brussels airport to cancel more flights. The New York Times. Russia, the international baccalaureate is discontinued. Isolationism. The Russian ban on international baccalaureate IB schools deepens its rupture with the West. The New York Times. Nepal to investigate killings and arson in student protests. The New York Times. The Philippines. Climate change protesters in Manila accuse government of misusing environmental funds. The New York Times. North Korea. Kim Jong-un open to talks if U.S. drops demand to denuclearize. The York Times. World. United Nations. Trump, as well as Zelensky, will speak this week as UN General Assembly gathers. Here is what to watch for. The New York Times headlines. The New York Times. September 21, 2025. Air pollution from wildfire. Wood burning. RAWSEP View. Wildfire fighter masks allowed after decades of denial by the United States Forest Service. From the article headline, At a wildfire with a notebook and a mask. The New York Times. Air pollution from wood burning and air pollution from fossil fuel burning. RAWSEP View. PM 2.0 emission from wood burning are 450 times the PM 2.5 emissions from the fossil fuel natural gas burning. One Canadian participant in Sunday made that fateful exchange and recounts the mistake in this article. The Canadian participant in Sunday also said solar panels could not be used on his house. That Canadian participant in Sunday should have bought a low-cost heat pump that works down to 40 degrees below zero and retained his natural gas furnace as a backup if temperatures dip below 40 degrees below zero. Exchanging a natural gas furnace for a wood-burning stove heightens pollution that harms human health, and that PM 2.5 pollution also accelerates climate change. From the article headline, Here Comes the Sunday. The New York Times. Astronomy. A tiny quasi-moon is following Earth around the sun. The New York Times. Consumers exercise. How good is exercise that feels effortless? The New York Times. Boating sale. GP boats fly. Flight controllers keep them going. The New York Times. Democrat retired senator from West Virginia who blocked many Democratic initiatives while in the Senate. Book review. Dead Center by Joe Manchin. The New York Times. Economy. Do you want a new job or just some external validation? The New York Times. Heat pump rebates end on December 31st, 2025. Grab your home energy tax credits while you still can. The New York Times. Illinois water pollution. Chicagoans avoided their filthy river for years. On Sunday, they swam in it. The New York Times. Media environment. RAWSEP View. A New York Times editor invites and challenges an intern to climb 40 stories with him. From the article headline, An intern climbs the stairs learning with every step. The New York Times. Medicine and science. Trump budget cuts to healthcare programs to fund tax breaks for the rich. This geriatrics training program escaped the axe for now. The New York Times. Music. Sonny Curtis, who wrote the Mary Tyler Moore theme, dies at 88. The New York Times. Nature and science. Do reptiles have moods too? The New York Times. Science. Mary Roach on the timeless appeal of weird science. The New York Times. TV. Democrats being a high-profile comedian right now is no joke. The New York Times. TV star. Democrat web of business interests complicates decisions about the Kimmel future Trump actions. China. TikTok. Australia. Trump says the Murdochs may join TikTok investors. The New York Times. Trump actions affecting university research. The Trump $100,000 H-1B visa fee spurs confusion and chaos for companies. The New York Times. Trump budget cuts to domestic food programs to fund tax breaks for the rich. Trump administration to stop measuring food insecurity. The New York Times. Trump Kirk actions at Kirk service. An extraordinary fusion of government and Christianity. The New York Times. Trump Kirk actions. Kirk funeral live updates. Trump addresses mourners at memorial. The New York Times. Trump Kirk actions for Erica Kirk. The Life of her husband cut short by violence, which her husband seemed to foresee. The New York Times Trump-Kirk actions in assault on free speech. Trump targets speech he hates. The New York Times Trump-Kirk actions. Opinion. America has entered an entirely new situation. The New York Times Trump-Kirk actions. Opinion. Ezra Klein is worried, but not about a radicalized left. The New York Times Trump-Kirk actions. Opinion. The debate over the motive and ideology of the Kirk shooting. Suspect. The New York Times Trump-Kirk actions. Republican leaders and Kirk supporters attend memorial. The New York Times Trump-Kirk actions. RAWSEP View red for dress at a funeral, not black. From the article headline, the patriotic dress code at the Kirk funeral. The New York Times Trump-Kirk actions. Trump remembers Kirk as a martyr while attacking political opponents. The New York Times Trump-Kirk actions, where Kirk stood on key political issues. The New York Times Trump military. Pentagon unveils new media restrictions in effort to quash leaks. Trump tariffs. Opinion. Crony capitalism has reached a new low. The New York Times. Canada and Mexico. Trump tariffs. Canada and Mexico turn to trains and ports to skirt U.S. tariff wall. The New York Times. Australia. Media empire inherited. Opinion. Congratulations, Lachlan Murdoch, you won a fading empire and a pile of debt. The New York Times. United Kingdom. Nature. Opinion. The story of the British large tree. The New York Times. Switzerland. The Trump tariffs on Switzerland prompt identity crisis for Swiss Army knife. The New York Times. Germany. Travel inside the Heidi Klum Oktoberfest free flowing beer lederhosen and more. The New York Times. Ukraine counterattacks scoring rare if modest success in Northeast. The New York Times. Russia. How the Russian sanctions evasion could create lasting costs. The New York Times. Russia in Alaska maps 7.8 magnitude earthquake off. Russia prompts brief tsunami advisory in Alaska. The New York Times. Sudan. Right-wing politics. Opinion. Sudan is what happens when you recognize a junta. The New York Times. World. United Nations. The UN gathers amid its 80th anniversary in a free fall. The New York Times. Headlines. The New York Times. September 20th, 2025. Consumers smart glasses seeing through the reality of the Metasmart glasses. The New York Times. Heat pumps lose United States rebates after December 31st, 2025. Grab your home energy tax credits while you still can. The New York Times. TV star Democrat. Opinion. Jimmy Kimmel and how the right is overplaying its hand. The New York Times. Trump Justice Department firing with ouster. Justice Department independence teeters as Trump exerts control. The New York Times. Trump-Kirk actions. Arrest in Arizona before Kirk memorial. Heightened security concerns. The New York Times. Trump-Kirk actions. Opinion. Why do we think we know the motive of the Kirk shooter? The New York Times. United States Congress. Schumer and Jeffries. Top Democratic leaders asked Trump for meeting to avert a shutdown. The New York Times. Nicaragua. They helped oust a dictator. Now the new regime is coming for them. The New York Times. Venezuela. Trump war U.S. military buildup in Caribbean signals broader campaign against Venezuela. The New York Times. Germany. Travel a calm before the beer taps open at Oktoberfest. The New York Times. Russia. Why Russia is reviving a Cold War-era song contest. The New York Times. Headlines. The Guardian. September 22nd, 2025. RFK Jr. RAWSEP View. The Trump distraction machine grinds on taking attention away from RFK vaccine denials to millions with this unproven Tylenol autism link speculation that helps no one and will probably cost the taxpayer millions. Beliefs contrary to proven science trickle down to infiltrate autism risk. Beliefs from the article headline. Trump officials reportedly set to tie Tylenol to autism risk. Trump administration. The Guardian. Tylenol guidelines. Is it safe to use paracetamol during pregnancy? Drugs. The Guardian. Trump actions. Trump distractions. We are exhausted, but not from doing too much. Can this woman help us survive the age of distraction? Health and well-being. The Guardian. Trump-Kirk actions. Kirk memorial melds religious revival and political rally. Video. U.S. News. The Guardian. Trump-Kirk actions. Kirk memorial. Trump says he hates his opponents at event attended by tens of thousands. Kirk shooting. The Guardian. Trump-Kirk actions. Trump and Elon Musk meet and shake hands months after messy split. Elon Musk. The Guardian. Trump-Kirk actions. Trump hails Kirk as a martyr for American freedom at memorial. U.S. politics live. Trump-Kirk actions. Trump rails against opponents in Kirk tribute after widow says she forgives shooting suspect as it happened. Kirk shooting. The Guardian. Trump versus United States University research afraid of our talent. India hits back against the Trump H-1B visa fee hike. India. The Guardian. Brazilians protest in their thousands against granting Bolsonaro amnesty. Brazil. The Guardian. European Union. India. Russia. EU calls for closer ties with India despite the Modi links to Russia. European Union. The Guardian. Germany. Russian aggression. German jets scrambled after Russian military plane flies over Baltic Sea. Russia. The Guardian. Ukraine. RAWSEP View. Trump meeting with Zelensky scheduled at the United Nations this week. From the article headline. Zelensky accuses allies of wasting time as he prepares for Trump meeting. Volodymyr Zelensky. The Guardia. Afghanistan's sexism and lack of equal opportunity for women. Send your daughters or you get no aid. The Taliban are making religious schools the only option for girls. Women under the Taliban. The Guardian. Headlines. Other media. September 21st, 2025. Minnesota. Ilhan Omar. Republicans rebuke remarks of Ilhan Omar on Kirk. Oklahoma. Gerrymandering. How the game is rigged before you even vote. Excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. AI overview. Yes, there are opponents of gerrymandering in Oklahoma, including citizens organizations and political groups who advocate for redistricting reform following the 2020 census. Reform advocates criticize the maps drawn by the Republican-controlled legislature for their partisan bias. Opponents of gerrymandering in Oklahoma include voter and political advocacy groups. Organizations like the League of Women Voters and Matriarch are active in advocating for redistricting reform and increased public input in the process. The Princeton Gerrymandering Project, this nonpartisan group, has examined the Oklahoma redistricting and identified issues, including challenges related to fairly representing the Oklahoma significant Native American population. Unsuccessful reform efforts. Attempts have been made to change the Oklahoma redistricting process, though they have been unsuccessful. This includes a failed effort to get a statewide referendum to create a bipartisan redistricting commission. Criticism of the 2020 redistricting. Opponents raised concerns about the maps drawn after the 2020 census, highlighting aspects like the splintering of the Oklahoma City heavy urban core and Hispanic neighborhoods into predominantly rural districts lawsuits. A 2022 lawsuit filed by Democratic voters and nonprofits challenged the maps in state court, arguing they were a partisan gerrymander that violated the state constitution. TV star Democrat Jimmy Kimmel boosted Hollywood. Now the neighborhood is worried. Los Angeles Times TV star Democrat recently fired MSNBC analyst complains that people mourn suspension of the Kimmel show. Not anything about me. TV star Democrat Trump 79 snaps at David Letterman for calling him out on Kimmel Virginia race for governor favors. Democrat RAWSEP View Democratic ex-Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger has a 12-point poll lead over Republican Winsome Earl-Sears in the race for Virginia governor. From the article headline, Democrat Spanberger leads Virginia race in new poll. Germany far-right neo-Nazi alternative for Deutschland FD tie CDU in latest German poll as far-right makes Western gains. Your active excerpts edited by RAWSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. AI overview. And Germany CDU stands for Christian Democratic Union. It is a center-right Christian democratic and conservative political party. Key facts about the CDU: it is one of the two major political parties in Germany and currently the largest party in the Bundestag. The CDU has a sister party, the Christian Social Union in Bavaria CSU, which only operates in the state of Bavaria. The two parties form a single parliamentary group known as the Union in the Bundestag. Several prominent German chancellors have come from the CDU, including Konrad Adenauer, Helmut Kohl, and Angela Merkel. The party was founded in 1945 by individuals from various political backgrounds who were opposed to fascism. It represents Christian liberal and conservative elements. Cat's corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. Saying the quiet part out loud. Roar. Hi, I am Tiger. Our human asked us to get up from our naps and start Cat's corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. She gave us a list of internet allies, which we will post for her here.
Hi, I am Leone. It is better for your mental fitness to go to these websites than to go to bro sites for advice. Substack letters from an American. Heather Cox Richardson. Substack your local epidemiologist. The Midas Touch. The Guardian. The New York Times.
One introduction. RAWSEP View. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only for home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions. Yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree. But it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen, and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lung, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom. The Eco-Design Wood Stove and International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. RAWSEP View purple air. PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.